So one of the questions a lot of people ask me, and you've probably asked yourself, is how do I stop myself from checking? And isn't that a pretty big question? Because if you were able to stop yourself from checking, wouldn't things perhaps be like much easier for you? But of course, it isn't that easy. And if it was easy just to stop checking, you'd have done it already, right? I mean, has anyone ever said to you, oh yeah, just stop checking? And you're like, thanks, great advice. Like, I never thought of that. And obviously, people mean well, but the whole point is it's so difficult to stop checking, okay? So this video is all about how you can start to help yourself with that. So why do you check? Well, I guess most obviously, probably because you just don't feel sure, right? Or you get a nagging doubt that pops into your mind, or a thought or an image, and that makes you think it's really important to check or redo the thing you've just done to be certain. Or maybe you just don't feel quite right about it. That's another reason why people would check, keep doing something until it feels just right. So probably by now you've realised, like, the more certain you try and get, the less certain you feel, right? The more that you check, the more that you try and make sure, the less you end up feeling sure in the long run. And that's why this whole thing kind of escalates, and you have to do more and more checking, more and more things to make yourself feel sure or feel like it's right. So if you think about it, most people have lots of different strategies they use, apart from just checking, like going back to check something or looking over it or touching it and feeling that it's okay. They'll have lots of other strategies, like taking a photo of something, so you can see later and show yourself that you have done it, or seeking reassurance, or getting someone else to do it for you. We come up with loads of other ways to try and make yourself feel certain. But of course, in the long run, nothing is ultimately making you feel more certain. So if we know that what you're doing right now is not working, we need to think about, what can we get you to do instead? Okay, so for me, this is a lot about learning to trust yourself, okay? But it's not so easy just to suddenly trust yourself, right? Because the whole point is, if you could, you wouldn't probably be feeling this way, all right? But I'm going to give you some tools that mean that you can learn to build that trust. So how do you eliminate the need to check? Well, clearly not by doing the stuff that you've been doing so far, because if that was going to solve the problem would have gone away, right? Okay, so we need to think, what can you do instead? So in this video, I'm going to use the example just of, leaving the house and locking the door. But I don't want you to think, oh, well, mine's different, because actually, you can use this method for any kind of checking. It doesn't matter what it is. And so when your OCD goes, yeah, but mine's different, mine's really dangerous, don't listen to that. That's just OCD's way of trying to get you to buy into the content and to not overcome it, all right? So it doesn't matter whether you're checking the gas, checking somebody's heart monitor, it really doesn't matter. You can still use this method to help yourself to learn to deal with it differently, okay? So one of the things that I've talked about in lots of videos is ERP, exposure and response prevention. And this is where you deliberately do something that you don't want to do and then don't do your responses. So that is definitely one route to helping yourself to stop checking, because by doing that, you eliminate the need to check. But I'm not going to talk about that in this video. In this video, I'm going to talk about another method that you might want to try. And because a lot of people hate doing ERP, you might find that this is useful as an alternative, but not instead of. I mean, I always want people to do ERP because it is so powerful in helping change your behaviors and your beliefs. Okay, but so this is an idea really for helping you to learn to trust yourself, okay? And this is going to sound really obvious, and you might be like, yeah, whatever. But I promise you, if you practice this, it will really make a big difference. And this is not like something that I've made up. Again, comes from loads of research, and we see over and over again that doing this really helps people create change. Okay, so what is it? It is acting as if you believe yourself. Okay, so just listen to that once more, okay? This is not about you believing in yourself, trusting yourself, right? It's acting as if you trust yourself. So behaving as if you trust yourself. Okay, now I get that that is easier said than done, especially when you have OCD and anxiety, all right? So I'm going to talk you through how you're going to practice doing that, all right? Because if you think about it, what does it look like when you trust someone? So if you have a friend and you trust them, are you constantly like ringing them, checking up on them, second guessing, asking them if they're sure, doing all that kind of thing? No, you're not. What you're doing is you're just letting them get on with something and acting as if you trust them, right? You're acting in accordance with the belief that you trust them. So at the moment, with your OCD and the checking, you're acting in accordance with the belief that you don't trust yourself, right? But how we behave has a massive impact on how we think. And it's actually easier, believe it or not, to change our behaviours than it is to change our thinking pattern. Because you probably know that it would be a good idea to trust yourself and that you'd like to trust yourself. But just because you know that and you know it's a good idea, it doesn't make it happen. So acting as if you trust yourself, all right, is what we're going to have you practice. So you don't have to trust yourself. You don't have to believe that you're trustworthy. You just have to act as if. I know it's not that easy, but how do we help you? So firstly, think of somebody that you know who you think trusts themselves or acts as if they trust themselves, right? Think of that person. It can be a friend, a relative. It doesn't even have to be a real person. It could be a cartoon character. It doesn't matter, as long as you can picture what they would do in the situations that you find difficult. So that person who acts like they trust themselves, how do they, for example, leave the house and go out the front door? What do they do? Okay, so you're going to use that person as your kind of guide. I mean, you're not physically going to ask them. You're going to do this just by thinking about it. Okay, so pick your person and then think, right, okay, I struggle to leave the house. What does that person do when they leave the house? Oh, okay, well, they just shut the door, turn the key, stick the key in the bag and drive off. Okay, right, so that's what they do because they trust themselves, or they act as if they trust themselves. So that's what I need to do if I'm going to act as if I trust myself. Now, I do get that is massively easier said than done, okay? And that's not the whole part of it at all. So what I want you to do, first of all, is I want you to practice imagining yourself doing that. Imagine yourself using the behaviours that this person who trusts themselves uses. So imagine yourself, walk yourself through in your mind, yourself leaving the house and doing that thing. Okay, you're going to rehearse it. And actually, when you rehearse, you might find you get a lot of the sort of thoughts and feelings come up for you as you would doing it. Okay, and that's really good because it gives you practice to learn to deal with those. You also might not get that, and that's fine if you don't. So that's your first thing is you're going to pick somebody who you think behaves like they trust themselves, and then you're going to rehearse the kind of behaviours that they would do, but you're going to do them in your head and you're going to rehearse them. That is part one of acting as if you trust yourself. Okay, so part two of acting as if you trust yourself is you've got to get clear on all the things that you do to try and compensate for the fact you don't trust yourself. So this is the stuff I was talking about earlier. Obviously the checking, the trying really hard to remember something, concentrating extra hard, taking a video, seeking reassurance, all of those things, the things you do to try and deal with the fact that you don't trust yourself, right? Those are all extras that you add in to try and be more certain. But of course, as we said, they make you less certain in the long run. Okay, so you've got to get really clear on all those things, and you're going to give up doing those things. Because does a person that trusts themselves take a photo of the door to check that it is locked so they can show themselves later? No, they do not. Okay, so you are going to be clear on those things, and then you are going to not do them. Okay, so you're not doing those things and you are doing the things that the person that you're using as your guide would do. Okay, that is the second part. Now here's part three, and part three is probably the trickiest part. Okay, you have to be prepared to ride the wave and tolerate the feelings that you're going to get from behaving differently. Okay, because just because you act as if you trust yourself, you're not immediately going to trust yourself, are you? And you're not immediately going to go, oh, cool, yeah, I shut the front door and it's fine and I've walked away and then that's all cool. No, you're not. What's going to happen? You're probably going to get bombarded by thoughts, images, worries. You'll feel very anxious. Things won't feel right. You're going to have a lot of stuff to deal with. Okay. Now, you have to be prepared to get through that and tolerate that if you're going to do this. Because if you're not prepared to do that, this won't work at all. Okay. So someone I work with, and what she does to help herself is she says to herself, the worse it is, the better it is. And that's just like a little thing she keeps in her head to remind herself that when she's feeling terrible doing something, that actually that doesn't mean that it is terrible, right? It feels terrible to her in that moment, but she knows that that terribleness of feeling and the strength of all of that stuff and the doubt and the anxiety, that by going through it and riding the wave of it, it's going to be better in the long run. So that's what she always reminds herself. The worse it is, the better it is. A little bit like, doing exercise, being in the gym or something. And if you never break a sweat or it never feels hard work, you're probably not going to get the results that you want. So you've got to be willing to tolerate those difficult emotions. All right. One of the things that a lot of people think about the checking thing is, I won't be able to tolerate those feelings, and I'm going to carry on worrying about it the whole day, or it's going to ruin the whole day. Now, that's part of the experiment for you. If you behave differently and you ride the wave of those feelings, does that actually happen? Does it actually ruin the whole day? Do you actually end up worrying about it until you manage to get back and check or see that the house hasn't burnt down, or somebody hasn't died, or whatever it is that you're worrying about? What we usually find is, if you ride that wave, it's that thing that you see in one of my early videos with my up down, where your emotions, your fear go up, and usually you do something to try and bring it down. But what we find is when you don't do that stuff to bring it down, and you let yourself habituate to the feelings, they will go away on their own. And actually, that doesn't tend to take all day. It can do, but let's hope it doesn't. And often it really doesn't. Often it's like people say to me, well, actually, by the time I actually got on the train, I'd kind of forgotten about it. Because life carries on, right? Other things happen. You need to buy your ticket. You need to, do some work, go to a meeting. Now, as long as when you're doing all that, every time you notice that you're in your head thinking about, oh my goodness, I didn't lock the door properly, what happened, blah, blah, blah. What have I done? Every time that you notice you're getting involved in your head, you've got to focus outwards again, okay? And again, that is easier said than done, and it takes practice. And I've got other videos that talk about that, and I've got some ones that talk about how you can really train yourself to get better at what you pay attention to. I think that's video 21. Okay, so if you do this, if you do step 1 and you act as if you trust yourself by using your guide and rehearsing it and then doing it, and you give up all the stuff that you usually do to try and make yourself feel safe, all the physical things, but you then spend your entire day stuck in your head going over and over what you did, mentally reviewing it, trying to make yourself sure, it will not work. Okay, so that third bit, which is probably the toughest bit, is the bit you're going to have to keep practicing, okay, however uncomfortable it feels. All right. And as you know, with OCD, there isn't a quick fix. Most things feel hard before they feel easier. All right. But this, when you practice it, will really help you to start feeling different. And this is about you learning that ultimately your thoughts or worries don't have to control you, that you can behave how you choose to behave, not how all of that stuff in your head or in your body is telling you to behave. Okay. And that's the trick about ultimately long-term overcoming your OCD, not getting better at being certain that you've shut the door or certain about whatever else it is, because you could get really certain about that thing, but then your OCD will just get you to be uncertain about something else. Okay, so this is about practicing trusting yourself, acting as if you trust yourself, tolerating all the difficult things that go with it, and learning to refocus your attention off all of the stuff in your head and see what happens. Okay. Now, I know that doing all of these things on your own can be quite difficult. So you can always maybe talk to somebody, a friend or whatever, and get them to, make a stand for you by you saying, right, to them, this is what I'm going to do. Can I call you when I've done it? Not in any way to get reassurance, but just say, I'm going to text you and I say, I've done my difficult thing today, for example. let me know how you get on. Try this out and then put some comments in. Let me know how you get on with trialing this, okay?